if you ever want to get favor with an investor, tell them how many customers you have and how much revenue you're making and what the gross margins are on that. What did Bill Gates have that most of us don't? He had a $1 million trust fund that his grandpa put together for him. So if this didn't work out, life wasn't going to be too bad for Bill.
What did you do when the capital guys didn't want to get behind you?
Found somebody else. Well, then you have idiots like Scott Galloway telling the generations X and Y that, the boomers have stolen everything from you. Really? Who stole it from us then? Because I didn't have a lot of, when I was a kid. I mean, we didn't, nobody was offering me a bunch of money when I got out of college to go start a business. If you do the right things, you may not need investors. On the other hand, if you have a high growth opportunity in a business that needs to scale in order to capture that opportunity, then of course you need capital because you cannot grow organically out of your own cash flow. It'll take too long. Somebody else will see what a brilliant idea you just came up with, come in with the capital that you don't have, and literally just fill the void you can't fill.
Tell about your origin story. Do people even know where Don comes from?
Today, we're going to try something a little bit different. My producers keep telling me, and some people in the audience who've watched some of the other podcasts, is that they don't know enough about me. And, I guess to explain that, I'm not very good at talking about myself. I don't like talking about myself, to be honest. And so, we go through all these episodes, and sometimes nobody knows nothing about me comes out. I might relate a story that's similar to, the story of the person I'm interviewing. But in general, I don't volunteer a lot of information. So in out of respect for the people who have asked, you seem to be the right person who knows me well enough, but not that well, that you could ask just out of general curiosity, who the hell are you? Where did you come from? What the hell are you doing here? And why do you think people give a crap what you think? Or, why do you think you can do this podcast and people will tune in? So I'm going to let you run with this and take me in whatever direction you want to go. There may be things I don't want to talk about, and I'll just straight up tell you. And if there's anything that's, relevant or pertinent that maybe you didn't ask me, I might just volunteer that on my own. Okay? So
awesome.
It's all yours.
Let's do this.
Okay.
So, yes, we've known each other for,
long time.
25 years.
Yeah, long time.
Not close friends,
yeah.
But in the same circles, running the same entrepreneurship challenges and trying to find what our true life mission is, right?
Yeah.
So, let's start with something simple because I think a lot of people don't understand why entrepreneurs take the risks they take. And that's really, if there's anything that describes my post-exit for the last 20 years, I have been on this mission to understand why we are the way we are.
Yeah.
So let's talk about origin stories. And I'm going to break the ice a little bit.
Okay.
I tell people laughingly, I'm a hayseed from Kansas. I grew up on a family farm. 1,000 acres was my back door.
Okay.
Closest neighbor was a mile away. Horses, cattle, animals of all kinds surrounded us. And I think that for me, coming into my professional career, I just didn't have any sense of limitations. And so much of my life has been a series of moving from one challenge to the next, not really considering that it was dangerous to do or that it was even risky to do. It just seemed like that's what life was about. So tell about your origin story. Do people even know where Don comes from?
No, I think it was interesting. A quick story. I was in my backyard. And in fact, I was by the pool in my backyard, and there was a young guy that was doing some work around our house. And, he's looking at what we built, and, we built a really nice house. And, I've been fortunate enough to have the means to do that now. And he said, can I ask? He said, what's it like, to have this kind of money? And I said, I don't know. I really don't. I said, I'm 70, almost 71. I said, I didn't have any of this until just a short time ago. I said, when I started the company that we just recently sold that blessed me with this wealth, I said, when I started it, I emptied my 401k. There were moments I wasn't sure where I was going to get my next mortgage payment. And I thought, holy crap, I'm 57 or 8 years old. I was 56, I think, when I started the company. I thought, if this doesn't work out, I don't know if I have time to start over. And I think that's what a lot of us who consider ourselves entrepreneurs do, is we are cocky enough somehow to believe that, hey, if I screw this up, I'll just go get a regular job and I'll make it back up later, or I'll go start another company and I'll make it up in that one. And I did. My first 2 companies, I thought, well, that's how it goes. Not everything is a huge success, but, they were middling successes. But I always thought that I had time to go do it again if I wanted to. And there was a long period of time between the second company and starting the last company where people would ask me, well, what are you going to do next? In fact, I was interviewing for a job and I had somebody tell me, I can't offer you a job because I know that the minute you come up with whatever it is that you want to go do on your own, you're just going to leave and go do it. And I'm like, well, that's not necessarily true. But it probably was. It probably was a very insightful thought on the part of that guy. And so for me, I grew up in the city in Chicago. People ask me, where are you from? I say Chicago. And, I'm from, Hoffman Estates, or I'm from, some suburb. I'm like, yeah, we didn't live in the suburbs. We lived in the city. And my parents bought the house I grew up in for $15,000 in 1959. And it was a little 2-bedroom, 1-bath house that my brother, my sister, and I were raised in. And we didn't want for anything much. But I know my parents struggled. I know my dad cashed in his life insurance policy to buy that house. And so, coming from fairly humble means, again, we didn't want for anything, but we didn't have a lot, and that was okay. And so when I think about how growing up in that way, in that place, at that time, shaped me into the person I became, I really struggle with that. I really don't know. I was always competitive. I played sports, and in doing so, I was always very competitive, and maybe that's a big part of it. The risk-taking part of it, my dad, he preached, get a good job, stay there for 40 years, get a pension, and then retire, and that's how I was raised. And I think that whole Protestant work ethic thing is what most Americans are raised with, which, interestingly, I find to be a real limiting factor for U.S.-born American citizens, because somebody told them entrepreneurship or starting a company is hard. And in fact, it is. But it's not that hard if you're thoughtful about it and do the right things, which is, I think, part of the process is, doing the right thing and making the right choices is the hardest part of anything, right? Just a relationship, business, even a career. So for me, it was about wanting to be my own boss. I didn't do well working for other people, while I respected the people I worked for. And in fact, many of them were great mentors to me and helped me a lot. I still wanted to be my own boss. I wanted to be the guy who helped make most of the important decisions because I was cocky enough to believe that I knew best. I remember going to my boss when I worked at Advanced Micro Devices, AMD, my boss, great guy, Tom Coleman. He called me in one day and he said, this other company that we do business with, they're not really happy with you. And I said, really? I said, well, they're kind of jerks or this or that, and he said, Don, stop being the title we hired you to be and just be yourself. And that was actually the best advice I'd ever gotten from anybody. We didn't hire a regional manager. We hired you. And we want you to be you, not some idea of what you think a regional manager should be, but we want you to be you. And that was, I think, the best advice I'd ever gotten from anybody. And really from that moment forward, I've tried to be authentic in everything I've done. And I know I failed at that probably 100 times, probably 1,000 times, but I at least have in my mind that that's what I should be. And I think in my authentic self, it was about running my own show, to be honest with you. And it felt good to run my own show and building teams of people that were on board with what I envisioned we should be doing. And that, to me, was the greatest part of the whole process, was building a team of people that were just amazing and, on board to go do whatever it took to make the company happen. And so that first taste of that, and when I first started my first company in 1990, is what caused me to do multiple companies after that. It just felt too good not to.
So incredible background you've shared. The humble means. I liken it to that when I was coming into my professional career, there were so many things that I was challenged to do that maybe I wasn't smart enough to know that I couldn't do them.
Well,
possibly.
I think that's part of it is, ignorance is bliss, right? I mean, I say this to people, especially in healthcare. When I pivoted into healthcare in 2007 or so, everybody told me we could not do what I wanted to do. And I said, that's because you work in the industry. You're so inundated with what you can't do that you never think that, well, maybe under certain circumstances we can do it. It's a problem that feeds on itself. It continues to feed on itself because people will not innovate because they'll say, well, you can't do that here, or we don't do that, or the industry will never accept that. And they already know what they can't do. Well, I was dumb enough that I didn't know what I couldn't do.
I think equally there's another side of it, which is when you don't grow up with a lot. Like you, as you said, you didn't want for anything, but you didn't have excess, right?
Yeah.
So many times, if something's going to happen, there's just not enough people or talent to make it happen in those environments. You just have to say, hey, I'm going to take this bull by the horns. I'm going to figure it out. I'm going to tackle it to the ground. And it's me against the, elements, or it's me against the machine kind of thing.
Right.
So I think that's a really positive way to live, to not be intimidated by challenges, to actually have a willingness to step outside of your comfort zone and have the confidence that you'll figure it out, even if there's not a good path that you could follow that somebody else has tread. It may just be that you have to make this one up on your own and be comfortable with that. What I want to chat about, though, is to take that on. There's a certain amount of fire in the belly that you're expressing.
Yeah.
There's this need to do something that other people would say out of judgment just probably isn't a wise move. For example, being 56 and deciding to take on one of the biggest challenges in your life with no time to recover if it doesn't work out. So talk a little bit about that fire. Where do you think, is that something that comes out of our origin stories, or is it who we are as individuals, that we just carry a different ember inside?
I think that your point about you have a special little ingredient in you that encourages you to do things that others would not be encouraged to do. Somebody told me a long time ago, the difference between an entrepreneur and everybody else is that if you bring the entrepreneur a problem, that person's going to think, well, how do I solve that problem? Or how can I capitalize on that problem? As opposed to those who say, well, that's just the way it's been, that's the way it is, and I don't think there's much we can do about it, but it's just the condition of where we are and what we're doing. And I think 99% of people just go, well, that's just the way it is. And then there's the 1% of us who go, but maybe we could change that. And could we? Can we? Should we? Sometimes just because you can do something doesn't mean you should. But I'm of the belief that, from my perspective is that you only can limit yourself. Most of the things that you want to do or think you can do, there probably are no limits to what that might be. But we tell ourselves there are. And so we stop in our tracks and go, well, it's going to be really hard. It's going to be really expensive. I'm going to put a lot at risk. My family's going to be mad at me because I'm going to spend a lot more time at work. It's part of this whole, current culture of work-life balance. Great. If you want a work-life balance, go have it. But please don't start a company. Because if you're off hiking in the mountains, doing your walkabout or whatever it is you need to do to keep your mental health square, then you're not here doing the work that needs to be done. And sometimes when you start a company, you're the one who has to be there to make sure it's happening. I just listened to Robert Herkovic from the Shark Tank guy say the other day, he said, there's 3 companies I would never invest in. One is a restaurant. Why? Because you have to be there 24/7. You can never go home, And I forget what the other 2 were, but it just struck me that, this notion of work-life balance sometimes limits people too now, because even they think, well, this is going to be too hard. It's going to take up too much of my time. I'm not going to spend enough time with my family or my wife or my husband or whatever it is. And they are deterred from doing what they really dream about, what they really, really want to do. And I'm unbounded by that. I don't let that get in my way. I find ways, even with my family. I mean, when my kids were young and I was starting my first company, I'd go home, at a normal time after work, 6:30, whatever or so, and I'd spend the evening with the kids. We'd have dinner together. I'd put them to bed, take a bath, and do all these things that we do. And then I'd go back to work. And then I'd work till 11 o'clock at night or midnight, get home, sleep, get up at 7, and go back and do it again. And I didn't see anything wrong with that. I honestly didn't. And my wife was like, okay, that's fine. You do your thing. And she trusted me not to take advantage of that, and I didn't. But it took advantage of me in the sense that I felt like I had to be there for some of these certain things. And so I was willing to make that kind of sacrifice. A lot of people won't. They don't. Right. And the fire that burns, or the ember that you're talking about, I think that's that little bit of ingredient that's in us that may not be in everybody. And that's
so
okay.
I think
not everybody should.
I think everybody has some degree of fire. I mean, our basic desire to survival instinct is an ember that everybody has. The question is why does it burn so brightly in some people and so intensely?
I can tell you why the ember in my belly got fired up is I had the opportunity, as I said earlier, to work for AMD, and they're based in California in Silicon Valley, and I spent a lot of time out there. And actually, after I moved to California, I spent 100% of my time there. And what I learned there was that there were people starting businesses everywhere. This was 1984, 83, the dawn of the microprocessor, kind of like today, the dawn of the AI, right? We're at the threshold of another technological revolution that frankly would never have been spawned if we didn't create microprocessors back in the 80s in the first place. And I was there for that, and that was pretty cool. But I'm watching these people in Silicon Valley starting all these businesses, and I was taken aback by how many of them were first-generation immigrants or direct immigrants themselves. Mm-hmm. And their English skills were not that great in many cases. And I thought to myself, there's nothing I don't have that they have, that I couldn't do the same thing. And, oh, by the way, I speak the language better. And so if I need to communicate my vision to other people, I can reasonably do that. And so that encouraged me quite a lot. Because, again, as I said earlier, I was brought up with this Protestant work ethic of, just get a good job and get a pension and, retire after 45 years and ride off into the sunset, with your fishing boat. And, and I didn't want that for myself. And as I witnessed what was going on out there, I thought, this is what we're missing. The U.S. citizens, we're not being taught this. Nobody ever said to me, hey, Don, I don't care what you do for a living as long as you own the company. Nobody ever said that. And I thought to myself, why can't I? Right. Why is it the domain of, and I talked to many of the people who were first generation Americans coming here to do these things, or their parents came and then they started, or they came on their own. Why did you come here to do this? Well, the answer was generally because this is the only place in the world where you can. And I thought, wow, we're really missing out here as Americans because nobody's telling us that.
I want to stop there, and actually, I used to hear people saying that, and I thought, that's just human desire. Like, is your population not willing to do it? But what I learned by traveling internationally is it's actually structurally built into
systemic.
It's a systemic and sometimes even laws that prevent or make it so harsh to have failure that you really cannot structurally take risk.
Yeah.
And I found that interesting because no one told me that as a kid. I mean, again, growing up on a big acreage and that kind of stuff, I didn't know there were people that were restricted.
Yeah.
I mean, that was a new learning for me, that there's actually places in the world you're restricted from ownership, or you're restricted from taking certain risks.
Right.
It's new finding that was amazing. But let's get back to another part of the fire. When we were young, you shared something that about your youth that resonated with me, and that is that there was a time in your life where there wasn't much space between thought and action.
Yeah.
Like, I have a thought, I believe I can do it, go into action. Mm-hmm. I would say that's what I was guilty of as a younger person, of being maybe what some people today call impulsive. Talk a little bit about that early you and now the you that you've grown into.
Well, the passage of time has, a tempering effect on all of us, I think. The youthful enthusiasm that was sometimes irrational that you have as a child or an adult, a young adult, has to get tempered by the market, by others, and sometimes that lesson is harsh, sometimes. But it has to be learned. It's not something you can read about in a book or teach in a class. It's a life, lived experience. And the notion that we can't do things, though, is first and foremost what's instilled in us. The risks we shouldn't take, the gambles we shouldn't make, the moves that, could end up hurting us in some way, physically, financially, career-wise. I mean, everything you can think about is why people don't do things and why we're told not to do those things. Coming up as a kid, I respect my parents, very much, but they were not encouraging at all when it came to this kind of thing. And so for me, I think about, young people today and how can we best encourage them to do the right things the right way, because back in the day, there was not a lot of that. You didn't, I hear a lot of young people today say, well, it's a lot harder to do things today than it was in your time. No, actually it's not. In fact, it's a whole lot easier to start a company today than it's ever been in the world anywhere. And I mean here in the U.S.
Even get capital.
And get capital. I mean, and people don't think that way because they're told how hard things are, right?
And you start to believe it.
Well,
like it's another barrier that you can't get through.
Well,
right?
Then you have idiots like Scott Galloway telling the youthful, the generations X and Y that, the boomers have stolen everything from you. Really? Who stole it from us then? Because I didn't have a lot of, when I was a kid. I mean, we didn't, nobody was offering me a bunch of money when I got out of college to go start a business. I was still overtaxed. I overpaid for mortgages. I did a lot of things that back in my 20s and 30s that I don't think were any less difficult than things are today. Are there differences? Yes, there's differences. But when you just measure hard and easy, I don't think it should be easy. I don't think entrepreneurship should be easy.
It should make you think a little bit.
Yeah, you should have to really be resourceful, thoughtful, know how to plan, know how to budget, know how to add and subtract, and even maybe do division once in a while.
That's a novel thought.
Well, I don't know that I've ever used differential calculus to do anything in any business I've had, but I'm sure there were applications for it that I didn't understand because I didn't take that class. But it should be hard. And I think to me, the steeper the mountain, the more challenging it was, and the more I wanted to take it on.
Do it.
Yeah.
So I share with people who tell me how hard it is. I tell people, stop and think of my background.
Yeah.
I'm off a farm.
Yeah.
I went to Kansas State University for agriculture,
Yeah.
hoping to be the family veterinary. That got
Yeah.
that got derailed by the economy.
Mm.
Came to Kansas City. Ag economy was crashing,
Yeah.
so even my education wasn't that helpful.
Yeah.
Crossed into healthcare, fell in love with something I never thought I would.
Yeah.
Fell in love with computers. Didn't think that was something I would ever in my life be doing.
Yeah.
And then an opportunity came about that serendipitously led to being able to buy a company out of a merger.
Really?
Who would say that in 1994 a female in technology would get funded
Yeah.
by anybody with a College of Ag degree
Yeah.
to start a computer company?
Well,
So when people tell me that, it is my opinion, it's all about force and will. It's like, do you believe in yourself enough that you are willing to meet those challenges and be willing to succeed in spite of those challenges that you're up against? To your point, some immigrant coming to America, barely able to speak English, and believing that this is the land of opportunity.
Yeah.
So why do we here in our own country, with all of the opportunities, not believe in that? And I think that's the real question when I hear about entrepreneur education.
Yeah.
I find it kind of an oxymoron.
Yes.
Talk about
Yeah.
that.
Yeah. Well, I agree. I think that the kind of fire it takes to go do what you and I have done can't be taught. Maybe a little bit can be coached, but you'd have to put somebody under your wing and have them actually assimilate everything you know by osmosis somehow in order for them to become like you are or think like you do. And I tell people that all the time. It's like, look, there's a problem. Go figure it out.
And figure it out in your way.
Yeah, it's okay. Because when you're CEO of something, a company you've started, right? You get a line of people outside your door who all have problems, and it's like Lucy and the Peanuts thing. For 5 cents, you can come in and talk to me, and I wouldn't even charge the 5 cents. But if you walked in with a piece of paper, I'd throw you out because I don't do paper. And that was the only penalty you paid for coming to my office unprepared. It was to bring a piece of paper. And I was like, okay, you're not prepared. Come back when you can actually articulate what you want to explain to me without a piece of paper, right? And to me, it was forcing people to be more resourceful on their own and maybe think a little bit longer and harder about the problem because they probably could have solved it without ever showing up in my office. But there's two reasons why people do. One is I don't know the answer, right, to the problem. The second is, well, I feel like, this is so important that you have to be involved in it. And generally what I tell people is, one, you know a lot more about this problem than I do. Because why? I have not been involved in it. And I'm not going to become an instantaneous expert at it when you walk in my office with your nickel and put it on my desk. And so the best person to solve this problem is you. Go figure it out. And when you have, you can let me know what you did or not, because I didn't know it was a problem in the first place. And if it goes away unbeknownst to me, then it never happened. And that's okay. And I think that's where a lot of young people fall down. First, they feel like they have to ask permission. I have 3 daughters I've raised. And one of the things I tried to instill in them is, because women do this a lot, and you probably have noticed it, they ask permission to speak. Well, can I say something? Or, hey, can I interject here? Or, hey, can I offer...
Spit it out.
Yeah, just say it. Men don't do that. Men just spew it out, right? And, if you say something stupid, we're going to look at you like you just said something stupid. But please don't ask for permission to speak, right? You're in a meeting. it's like we did the Andre Davis podcast, a few weeks ago, and he was telling me about going into meetings and not being like, his comment was, I don't see anybody that looks like me, right? He's African American, and he's the only African American in the room, and he feels isolated, and he's being judged and all these things. And I said, so there's your implicit bias. You think white people have this implicit bias? Where did yours come from? You walked in a room that you were invited into, and you still don't feel like you're in a place where people give a crap what you have to say. Of course they do. Are they going to judge you? Yes. Everybody who speaks is going to be judged. Everybody, not just you. You could be any color, and we're going to judge you, because that's what we do as human beings. It's what we do. I said, so don't take offense to it because you're being judged. We're all being judged.
Be ready to defend it.
But be ready to defend your stupid comment or whatever it is you said.
And maybe it isn't even stupid.
Maybe it's not.
Maybe you've hit upon the one thing everybody else will not consider.
You're in the room because we invited you.
Yeah.
And so I think that's. But what I see in a lot of people today is they feel like they have to have permission first. I have to have somebody, and I think that's what I remember doing the Adam Arredondo podcast, and Adam was talking about all these ESOs, entrepreneurial support organizations, both government funded and then, not, right? Just grassroots organizations. And we talked a lot about that. And I finally said, Adam, when did entrepreneurship become a team sport? I've started 3 companies. I didn't need anybody else around me to coach me, mentor me, drag me kicking and screaming in the meetings or whatever it is, or South by Southwest. I didn't need any of that. What I needed to do was focus on my business and get that shit right? Do that right. Build the right team, get the right people doing the right things the right way, and that's what I need to be doing. Not, because who am I going to go ask? Well, how do you think I should handle this? How do you think we set up the supply chain? How do you think? Nobody knows. They don't know. Again, it's like walking in my office saying, hey, I got a problem. Okay, you're probably the best person to solve it, because why? I don't know anything about it.
And you recognize it.
Right.
Like nobody else even knows it's a problem. You're probably an expert and you don't know it.
And if you go sit and think about it a little bit, maybe it's not the problem you think it is. But nonetheless, I think I feel a sense of responsibility to help not young, but other entrepreneurs achieve what they can. But yet the biggest obstacle to doing that is they think they need me or somebody or some people to support them along their way. I mean, I don't know how many organizations we have that call themselves entrepreneurial support organizations in this town, but my view is we already have too many. In fact, probably one is too many, because you give the wrong people hope that they can do something that they're never going to do.
And you diminish the people who would have done it without your approval.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So why do you need it? Why do you need somebody's permission? Why do you need somebody to hold your hand? Why can't you just go do the thing that you envision doing, build the team you need to build, and go find some customers? I mean, isn't that what it's all about?
So what you've described is very much aligned with what I've come to over the last 20 years, which is there is a flame. It's how brightly does it burn. But also there's a forging. It's like metal.
Yeah.
Metal, people think, well, I'm looking for pure gold. Pure gold is actually a very soft metal.
Yeah.
There's a forging of the fire that happens with metal. There's a alloy where you're taking lots of different metals and making them even stronger together. In my mind, that's really what entrepreneurs do.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Talk a little bit about the parts of your journey where you met somebody that was really instrumental, good or bad, either way, whatever comes to mind, that changed you, that changed the way you think, that changed the way you approach something. Share that experience.
So before I went to work for AMD, I was working for an electronics distributor, Aero Electronics, who's one of the largest in the industry today. And I think they were number 2 when I joined them in 1978-ish. I had just gotten married. I was 22 or 3, 4, something like that. and I had gotten this job at Arrow, and I had no idea what I was doing. But yet, within 6 or 9 months, I actually was pretty good at the job. And the people at AMD noted that. So they were we distributed their products. So I worked with the local team in Chicago. There's a guy there by the name of Dan McCraney, who was the area manager for AMD, and young, good-looking guy, a lot of fun to be around, smart as could be, a double E engineer. And so one day, he and one of his colleagues, Chuck Beatty, asked me to go to dinner with them. And he asked me, he said, what would it take to get you to come on board? And I said, well, I understand that you guys have a requirement that everybody in the sales organization have a electrical engineering degree. I said, I don't. He goes, oh, no, we know. I said, I don't have any degree. I'm like, ooh, that may be a little harder to sell. And I said, well, are you enrolled in school? No. Are you going to enroll in school? Say yes. And I said, sure. Yeah. And I'm going to finish up my degree work. I'd already had 2 or 3 years of college. But like a lot of people of my ilk, I guess, we get bored with college pretty quickly because it's not leading to the things we want it to lead to. Yes, it helps round you out, and you're a better conversationalist, and I can talk about a lot of different topics and read a lot of books and things like that. But, I was on a mission, man. I wanted to get it done, get that sheepskin on the wall, and go do my thing. And to me, 4 years of that was just too long. I'm a very impatient person. I think that's another element of me, or an ingredient in me, that, like you said, it's not impulsive. I'm very thoughtful about what I do, but I'm very impatient once I've thought it through to get it done. And people who know me know I'm that way. So once Don gets in his head that we're ready, then damn it, we're going to go do it. And come hell or high water, we're going to figure it out, right? We're going to make mistakes, a lot of mistakes, but we're going to learn from those mistakes. But we don't make mistakes for the sake of learning. We can only learn from the inadvertent mistakes that we make. Please don't try to make mistakes because, we can learn a lot. No, please don't do that. In a startup, you have to use what resources you have very efficiently, and using them to make mistakes so you can learn from them is not an efficient use of our resources. But, for me, Dan McCraney was probably pivotal because when he brought me in, so he found a way to get an exception to hire me. And that said 2 things to me. One is I have the ability to climb the ladder socially and economically and career-wise because people see the potential in me. And the second thing it did is it just gave me a lot more confidence than I probably had in myself before that. I wasn't sure. And you need people, I think, along the way to tell you, no, you have the right things. You have the right stuff. You can do this. You need to embrace that and then go do it. Don't wait for somebody else to hold your hand or pick you up or, shovel you into the furnace. You need to get there on your own. And yet, with good people around you, they'll help you. They want to help you. It's not because you asked. It's because they want to.
They are attracted to the flame.
They want to be a part of your journey, right, in some meaningful way in a lot of cases. And I actually just posted something on LinkedIn this morning that somebody had posted about how they got passed over for a promotion. And I'm like, stop. You got passed over for promotion for a lot of reasons. It wasn't necessarily personal, but if you're going to take everything personally, then you probably need to be somewhere else because, you don't know what your boss could or couldn't do. Yes, I'm a stellar employee, but that's your own evaluation. It's not necessarily everybody else's evaluation of you. And so maybe you just don't have all the right stuff that you think you do.
Or maybe you do and you just have to prove it.
Well, maybe that's what it is. I always tell people that work for me, if you want to get ahead here, do such a great job at the job we hired you to do that I've got people asking me why we don't have you doing more or giving you more responsibility. But if you just tell me, I want to get ahead, how do I get ahead? I want to get promoted, I want to be this, I want to be that, and you haven't actually done anything yet, I'm sorry, that goes in one ear and not the other. I don't even hear that. I don't want to hear that. That gives me no impetus, no reason to do anything more for you than I would do for anybody else. and just because you want it more. Okay, I want a lot of things. I don't have them all. And you haven't earned it yet. And that's okay. You have it, you have time to go earn it. Nobody's saying you can't. You can earn it here. But if you don't feel like I'm dragging you kicking and screaming to success just enough, then maybe you need to go somewhere else. And that's okay too, because I would never want to hold people back. And if you think I'm holding you back, then
and I think that's
go.
If there's anything that I feel like our society has done to young people, is we've taken away so much that you learn by action. Like, I grew up on a farm.
Yeah.
You grew up in a household where you had to make things happen on your own. I'm sure you fixed your own lunch most of the time.
Most of the time.
I think we have eliminated those learnings where, hey, if somebody won't do it for me, I'll just go do it for myself.
Yeah,
And then when you get the bad review from an employer, you're completely diminished by it, or you believe what they said. What I think is odd is anytime anyone's ever thought bad about me, I mean, I know who I am.
Yeah.
And if they think badly about me, there's a problem with them.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that's what our young people lack, is this, do you know who you are? Do you know how to do things for yourself? If someone gives you a bad review, prove them wrong. Go do something in the organization, outside of the organization, whatever it takes.
Yeah.
But don't let somebody diminish your fire. I mean, people can't do that to you. You do it to yourself.
Oh, yeah. Well, I think we do a lot of things to ourselves that are unwarranted because we think other people think that of us. And I think another ingredient I probably have that, not everybody does is I could give a rat's ass what other people think most of the time. Even as I was on my journey starting the business that I've started, you get a lot of advice from a lot of people, and it's all well-meaning, but I never took it. It's like, you're not living in my shoes. You don't know what I actually have to do. I've just introduced this idea to you a few days ago or an hour ago, and now you know more about it than I do. Probably not. But they do. I mean, you go visit with investors. You know how it is, right?
Well, why aren't you doing this? They're an expert in your business.
Yeah, well, gee, if I was, we would be doing this too. And, why aren't you selling your customers other things? Why are you just, how are you going to mine your customers for more money? Blah, 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 blah. Everybody's got a better way of doing something than the way you just explained it after you've been working on it for years and they just heard about it an hour ago. And so you have to take that with, what it's worth, right?
And maybe there's a gem in there. Maybe there's a new thought that you haven't had.
Yeah.
But probably
generally not.
But generally not.
Generally
so let's
not.
Talk about...
That's why I don't understand the team sport thing about entrepreneurship. It's like, who are you going to inculcate into your startup culture, mentality, whatever it is, so quickly that they can actually hand you actionable, reasonable advice? Who? Now, venture capital people, if they've invested in this industry multiple times in similar types of companies, actually they have wisdom. They have nuggets that they can share, and they try very hard to do that. And so, but what I tell even the venture guys, is don't compare me to these other businesses because we're not like them. We are different from them. If you want to invest in a company that's like companies you already know, then it's already too late for me because I'm not doing that. It's largely the innovator's dilemma, in my opinion, that if you're doing something that nobody else has done, what these MBAs who populate most of the venture capital firms have learned in MBA school is how to spot silhouettes that are recognizable. They do case study, go and talk to any MBA. They do case study after case study after case study. I mean, from day one until day whenever, you're done, right? Day done. Why? Because we wanted to teach you the way other people have done these things. Great, that's great. But I'm not doing that. So stop comparing me. Well, when I started IVX, it was like, well, you're just like an imaging company. No. Well, how are you different? We treat the same patient over and over and over again for the rest of their lives. If I go in for imaging, I'll never see that tech again. I may never see that building again. Why would they treat me the way that we treat our patients who are going to come back every month and get their treatments from us? I wouldn't treat them that way if I was never going to see them again, right? We get them in, get them out, because it's all about volume. I'm not building relationships here with my customers. They're in and they're out. Because my real customer is actually who pays for it. Who's paying for it? The insurance company's paying for it. I have a long-term relationship with them via contract. So they're sending me their patients. I don't need to please the patient all that much. Of course, we have to do a good job and take care of them and do the appropriate work. But on the other hand, I don't need to build a relationship with them like we did with the people who we were infusing every month for the rest of their lives. And so when the venture people tried to find the silhouette that I resembled, and they couldn't, like, well, Don, this looks really risky. I know.
Yeah.
It's risky because it's not something you recognize. It's not a silhouette you know. So what am I supposed to do? Either be like everybody else, and then you wouldn't be interested in me at all. Or I'm going to be different than everybody else, and that should interest you. Which is it? Pick one. Because you're on the side of, no, if I don't recognize that I can't do it, then I'm in the wrong place. I'm in the wrong place.
So we have not really discussed money much here.
Yeah.
And that's for a reason. I hear so many people say, I don't have the money, as being the barrier to whether they can start a business or get it to grow. Or in my mind, it's never been the money. Yeah. Money is an element that is necessary when you have really good ideas.
Yeah.
And you can convince other people
and you want
that
to scale.
It is a really good idea.
You want to scale, right?
But so many people think it's money that even allows it to start. And I think that that's the capital folks trying to make themselves too important in the whole equation.
Yeah.
I think there's a certain extent that the money needs to be only considered gasoline in the engine.
Yeah.
And that's all it is. Talk about what your experience is, and what did you do when the capital guys didn't want to get behind you?
Found somebody else. I mean, it's just like sales, right? Because what you're selling is you're selling your company, you're selling yourself to whomever is going to invest in you, because really what you're exchanging is the perceived prospective value of you in exchange for their money, right? So what do you have to do? You have to explain to them why it's worth taking a ride with me, because it's going to have a great outcome, right? But raising money is, well, as you say, it's secondary to raising customers. This is the question I always ask aspiring entrepreneurs is, who's your customer? How many have you talked to? How many have you got? I have been asked to invest in a variety of deals, and my first question is, how many customers do you have? Oh, we've got a pilot going at this hospital. We got a pilot going here. No. Those aren't customers. Those are pilots. Who's actually given up their money in exchange for whatever this thing is or service is that you're doing? Who? And how much? And is it consistent? Is it something that's going to last? Is it a customer that's going to be around for a while and you're going to go find some more of them? And is it a repeat customer? Is it the same customer? Is it a different customer every time? I don't know, right? I mean, like restaurants, they have a mix of, return visitors and then newbies, right? And that's always the case. So how do you get to them? And instead of raising money, go raise customers. Revenue is the great deodorant. No matter how stinky your ideas may be, no matter how stinky you are delivering the vision and the value and all the other props that you have to do to get funded and go do the things you want to do, if you ever want to get favor with an investor, tell them how many customers you have and how much revenue you're making and what the gross margins are on that. And compare that to your cost to get the thing done, and then tell me that, okay, that these margins are sustainable or they're not sustainable. That's all I want to know. I really don't give a rat's ass who other investors you've talked to or who you think should be investors in your company. If you do the right things, you may not need investors. On the other hand, if you will have a high growth opportunity in a business that needs to scale in order to capture that opportunity, then of course you need capital, because you cannot grow organically out of your own cash flow. It'll take too long. Somebody else will see what a brilliant idea you just came up with, come in with the capital that you don't have and literally just fill the void you can't fill. So when we started expanding IVX, everybody said, well, why did you go to California? It's the biggest market in the country. It's the most regulated market in the country. If I can meet the needs of that, the regulatory state and the customers in that state, then I could go do this anywhere. And why wouldn't I? Why wouldn't I? Well, it's just so much further away. Actually, I can get on the plane at 8 in the morning and I can be there by 10. Why? Because there's a 2-hour time difference. So I get there at 10 o'clock in the morning. I can stay as long as I like. What's the difference? Well, most organizations, they grow in concentric circles. Why? Because they have supply chain issues. I don't have a supply chain issue. Well, yeah, but you have. No, I don't have barriers that you think I have.
It's really interesting that you talk about that. What you just expressed is breaking the halo. You didn't operate inside of your comfort of your region, where you know people, where they will tell you what you want to hear, or where they may not spend much money with you, but somehow that comfort that I know them, and you actually went someplace that was going to challenge you. It's that forging again of the metal.
Well, but there was an ulterior motive too that most people didn't know. I'm not even sure I've ever articulated it to a broader audience. The money is in California. I don't give a crap what you think about where, capital in these small cities. And look, the vast majority of invested capital is coming from California or Boston. It just is and has been and will be. So if I wanted to get the attention of real investors, real venture firms or PE firms with real deep pockets who could really be my financial partner, where should I go? Where? Oh, the Bay Area in California. Where did we open our first 2 California locations? On the peninsula in San Mateo and in Fremont, California. When we finally did get the investment we were hoping to attract, which we did, and I tell people this story sometimes, I was standing in my master bedroom closet getting dressed to go to work that morning at 7 a.m. My phone rang, and it was a 415 area code. And I know 415 because it's San Francisco. Well, I thought, well, who in San Francisco is calling me at 5 o'clock in the morning their time? Gee, I better pick up this phone, So, hello, it's Don. Hey, Don, this is blank blank from MacKinnon Ventures. We see you've expanded into California and Chicago. Heard you're just putting one in Philadelphia now. Do you need some help? I go, well, I need all kinds of help. No, do you need a financial partner? And I said, of course I do. And you already know the answer to that question. And so we had a brief conversation about things. And when we got near the end of the conversation, this gentleman said to me, he said, Don, he said, I grew up in Minnesota. He said, I'm a Midwest guy myself. And he said, it's so refreshing to talk to an entrepreneur who actually has problems, actually has challenges, who understands those challenges. He said, out here in the Bay Area, all you get is sunshine blowing up your ass all day long by these guys. He said, they're overconfident, they're overfunded, they're overcaffeinated. He said, it's just so nice to talk to somebody who's kind of normal. And I said, well, that's me. I'm the normal guy, the authentic guy I always wanted to be. And that led to what became, a great exit and a great run. I mean, the company's still going. It's 12 years old now. But my proudest achievement, actually. And why did we go to California? Because that's where the money is. And I thought if anybody was going to notice me, I had to be out there for them to notice me. And then later on, at the end of due diligence, MacKinnon had brought in another venture fund to round out the deal, as they typically do. No investor wants to be the only investor in, especially in something that's going to need a lot of capital. And they knew it was going to need a lot of capital. So they brought in this other firm, great people. But the head of that firm and I were in my office one day, and he pulls me aside. He goes, Don, why did you ever think you were ready to expand this business? And I had to think about the answer to that. And I said, well, you're not wrong, Marty. We weren't. But then how would we ever figure out what our deficiencies were if we didn't do it? I mean, we could sit and theorize all day long about what it was all going to take, but we would never know what it was all going to take, what all it would take, if we didn't go do it. I said, there's a regulatory state in California that's, vastly different than what we're dealing with here in Kansas and Missouri. I said, even in Chicago, I said, just putting a facility up in Glenview, Illinois was a lesson in, local officials and bullshit, zoning rules and all this other crap. And if we didn't do it, we would never know that we might face those kinds of issues. The Fremont location took 8 months to get done. The San Mateo one went a lot faster because why? It wasn't the same county as Fremont's in, and that county is a real pain in the ass. I said, so Marty, if we hadn't done it, we would never have known that these challenges even existed. And he said, well, we would have advised you not to because you weren't ready. If you hadn't, we wouldn't be here today. And to me, that was like, I don't know, the first, I don't know, it was just such a gratifying feeling because it was one of the purposes we went there for. Sure, we wanted to learn about the market. We wanted the customers out there or patients out there, but we also wanted to attract capital. What better way to do that?
So now fast forward.
Mm-hmm.
You're at a point where you can truly decide what you want to do, when you want to do it, how you want to do it, with whom you want to do it. I mean, all the pleasures that all of us hope that we get to achieve.
One day, right?
One day I'll be able to do it all the way I want to, the way we said it as we left our parents' house. We left our parents' house saying, I won't have to ever follow your rules again. And then you found out that they really weren't their rules.
Yeah, I still make my bed every day. Yeah.
So talk about now looking to what is it that you really want to do? Like, what are the things that make a difference in your life? You talk about coaching other entrepreneurs. You talk about, I know you've served on some advisory boards. I know that you've taken some risks that maybe, in retrospect, you might have wanted to think twice about taking. How do you look at this new phase, the dawn of 2026 forward?
It's actually a little scary, Rebecca, to be perfectly honest with you. Having the resources I have today are relatively new to me. And making the right decisions in terms of estate planning and making sure that my family is well taken care of without being, I don't want to screw up too many generations of my family. They're going to forget what Grandpa did. My grandkids are going to not realize what it took to help make this estate what it is. And, with too much money, they could run off the rails and do stupid shit and, not understand delayed gratification and sacrifice and working hard and things like that. So it's kind of, what's the measure of that? What amount can I leave them and not worry too much about how I'm going to screw them up? On the other hand, growing up the way I did, my wife is even more frugal than me. I mean, she's the daughter of a janitor. They lived in the basement apartment. She never lived in a single-family home until after we got married. And, her dad got the garden apartment because that was part of the compensation package for being the guy who cleaned the apartment building. And so most of her bicycles and toys and things like that were things he found in the lockers of the people who moved out and left that crap behind. And that's what she got. Hey, Joanne, I got you a new bike. Well, it's not a new bike. It's somebody else's bike. They just happened to leave it behind. And, that was her life. So today, I mean, that level of frugality and the length of time in which she lived in it is impossible to separate from her. It is who she is. And, I mean, here's a woman with all the resources in the world, and she had a shirt on the other day, and I said, where'd you get that? She goes, Walmart. Oh, honey, stop shopping at Walmart. Well, I was just walking by and I saw this. What are you doing in the store in the first place? I don't even know why you're in there. What are you doing in there? Well, that's where I get this and that. It's like, oh my gosh, But, I mean, what I look forward to is having the freedom to think about those things, to contemplate what the right things to do are for my family going forward. But in the meantime, I've recently had some health challenges, and I said to my wife, if I die with all this money in the bank, I'm going to be really pissed. It's going to be, the one regret that I have is I didn't go out and, I don't know, do more with what resources I have. But I hope the good Lord gives me the opportunity, in spite of my health challenges, the opportunity to live a long life and do all those things. And I certainly have a whole laundry list of, places I want to go hiking, countries I want to visit, adventures I want to go on. Before all this happened, I was down in Patagonia hiking and doing the Torres del Paine National Park down there, which is considered one of the top 5 or 10 hikes in the world. And, those were all on my list to go do. If the good Lord gives me the health to go do them, I'm going to go do as many of those 5 or 10 hikes as I can. And that to me is the freedom to do the things I would rather have done when I was in my 30s and 40s, but I didn't, because I was dedicated to my career, to my businesses I started, and to the people who came along with me. Because I'll be honest with you, I remember the first company and the first investment we got from outside investors. It's a scary day, because now you realize there's no going back now. There's no, screw it, I'm going to go get a job. This is too hard. There's none of that. You are now obligated. You are now committed. And so there's a sense of pressure and obligation that you immediately feel. You've had this happen.
And you got to see it through.
And you got to see it through. And
there's no I just don't want to do it anymore.
Yeah, I've had enough of this. I'm going to stop.
But
so
isn't that
that's a good thing?
Isn't that kind of how we approach life? Like now you and I set earlier talking about, as you think of your health challenges and the advice you're getting from others, from doctors, from loved ones, from people who truly have your best interests in mind, but you have still a list of things that you want to do and that involve a certain amount of risk.
Yeah.
Talk about how that you got to see it through. I mean, it's one of those things that kind of nags at your brain, right? Like if you go to bed at night and you still want to go on this trip and you haven't gone on this trip.
Yeah.
So talk about how it's, again, approach to life. How do you assess risk at this age with the challenges that you've gone through and know that you face? How do you assess risk at this point?
Well, I could tell you that the things that I think about from a risk perspective have nothing to do with my personal life. They have everything to do with the fact that information about my financial condition, got published and propagated in such a manner that I've gotten calls from a lot of people I hadn't heard from in a long, long time who are trying to do something that requires capital. And some of those are really good people that I've known that have worked with me or for me that I care about in some certain way. And, I want to give them a fair hearing. But my predisposition going into every one of those conversations is I'm not going to do a damn thing. And I spend most of the time giving them the opportunity to pitch me, thinking about how am I going to tell them no when they get done. And I think that's a good way to manage that risk, is you really have to knock my socks off to get me to write a check for anything like that. And because there are plenty of alternative investments I can do through my wealth manager that I don't need to be doing entrepreneurial things with my money. And I tell people, I'm the Kevin O'Leary of angel investors, if I'm an investor at all. And that is, I want an immediate return. I'm not looking for equity. I'm too old. I don't want to wait 10 years, 12, 15 years to get an exit. I won't be around maybe to enjoy that. And so if you want me to do something like that, then I've got to involve my extended family, my children, because now this is their money, their inheritance that I'm putting into your company. And they're the ones who are going to be around to reap the benefits of it. If, in fact, there are any, I won't be. And I have to measure everything that way now. And that thinking about that, just dealing with that, is a source of stress for me. And I could eliminate all of that just by saying no to everybody up front. But I'm just not that way. in some cases, I'm just curious. It's like, what are you doing? And maybe it is interesting enough. Maybe I will write a check. I don't know. But it's more, like I said, I go into it with, I'm not going to write a check. I'm never going to invest in this. And I think that's the right approach for me, because now you have to knock my socks off to get me to do something, and most people don't. Most people can't. And because I've done enough things on my own, and I've watched other people do really great things, that if it's not really, really, really great, And to be honest with you, Rebecca, I still have ideas of my own that if I were 40 years old, I'd be going off and doing on my own. I have one right now. I'm so excited to talk to somebody about it that I'm not even sure where to go with this. But I think I would almost collaborate with somebody on the idea. I certainly am not in a position to do it myself, but I think it's a solution, could be a substantial solution to the chaos that is our current healthcare system. And I want to go do it. I want to do it so bad that I've actually thought about reaching out to some PE firms and others to see if they might help me. But then once I do that, then I'm committed, and I don't want to be committed.
Yeah, because they're going to
want
you
to say,
to do it. It's your idea.
We want you to do this.
It's your
right?
idea.
Yeah. Somebody's got to be the vision leader here, and that sounds like you. And so I've been reluctant to do that only for that reason. But I think it's a stellar idea, and I would, if I was 40 or 45, I'd go do it in a heartbeat on my own. And but now I won't. And so I'm trying to figure out, how do I bequeath this idea to somebody who will, that's deserving of this great idea, but also has you got to, it's a high risk, high roller deal. And it isn't going to take millions of dollars. It may take billions of dollars to do. But it would be, again, I think a super disruptive solution to our $4 trillion healthcare problem. And so even if it cost a few $1 billion, it's still
small,
inexpensive compared to the waste and abuse of our current system that's currently out there.
So let's bring this around to a recap.
Mm-hmm.
Give a top 3 recommendations to young people. And it doesn't matter what walk of life they're coming through, what advantages they've already had. When you look at the 50 years
mm-hmm.
of your professional experiences, what would you say now that a young person should be thinking about?
Well, I think my first comment would be to young people is, don't be afraid to grow old or older. Don't waste your youth on idealistic things that are not necessarily going to pan out, you're not ready for, you're not capable of. You need to have more operational experience than you think you need in order to run a business. An idea by itself is just an idea. Now you're an inventor. You're not an entrepreneur. You have an idea. So what? There's no providence over ideas. Everybody has ideas. Some are worth doing, some are not. You're not even in a position to discern whether your idea is a good idea or a bad idea. Yet, with these entrepreneurial support organizations, no matter how stupid your idea is, you find willing support for it because why? That's their job. That's their job description is to provide support to entrepreneurs, no matter how stupid their ideas are. And the reason your idea is stupid and not well thought out is you haven't had time. You don't have the experience. You don't have the framework to really assess if your idea has true merit and can be scalable. And I think that's why, unfortunately today, especially in our smaller community, why you see people celebrating the opening of a new coffee shop or a dress shop or a barbecue joint or something like that. Those aren't scalable businesses that require a lot of capital. You're not putting a lot at risk. I could go open a barbecue shop tomorrow. And if I close it in 6 months or a year, so what? It's like a nail shop. I mean, they come and go like crazy. Or restaurants. I mean, what you know. So my first recommendation would be go learn, be a sponge, absorb everything you can from everybody around you, both good and bad, and to be able to assimilate that information into, okay, here's the good things I'm going to keep and the bad things I'm going to discard. But knowing that those bad things are out there is very valuable, very valuable. But you don't know that. So go learn that. I mean, I started Destination, my first company, when I was 36 years old. That seems young, but I already spent 10 years at AMD before I did that. So I knew the industry. I knew the people who were going to be my customers. I knew what the industry needed. I knew what we were lacking. And I could go fill that void with something because why? I had the framework for doing it. People who are 26 trying to start a business, what the hell do you think you're doing? You're not ready. You might, sure, a Zuckerberg or somebody might land on an idea that, that has potential. And I'm not saying that every 26-year-old is never going to be successful. I'm not saying that. Some might be just by luck.
I was 29.
Yeah, well, I mean, again, it doesn't, the actual number doesn't matter.
No, it doesn't.
It's about your experience, the framework you have, the scaffolding that you can build on your own to go get this company to the point where other people might be attracted to it, including good employees, because you can't ever do any of this on your own. You can't. You got to build a team, but that team has to be singularly focused around the vision that you give them. And if you can't articulate that vision to good people, you're not going to succeed. And again, people want to follow others who they believe are going to take them to the promised land. If you've never seen the promised land, if you don't know the road, the signs to read in order to get there, or the map to read to get there, I don't know why I'm following you. You don't know where you're going either. Why would I get on board with you? So I think the patience to learn and absorb and assimilate information is paramount. That doesn't even need to be a 2 and a 3. To me, if you have the 1, then you're in a much better position to move an idea forward. But 2 and 3, again, raise customers before you raise capital. If you do nothing else, go find a frickin' customer who will part with their money for whatever bullshit idea you have. And then convince me that there's 1,000 more like that, and 10,000 more after them, and 100,000 more after them. Convince me of that, because 1 doesn't cut it, 10 don't cut it, because there was a book written back in the 90s, I think, called Crossing the Chasm. I don't know if you remember that book. Mm-hmm. I forget the guy, Malone. I forget the guy's name who wrote it. It's a fantastic book. You can find early adopters for some cool technology stuff because that's what they do, right? I want the newest, coolest thing that's out there, and that's the early adopters. That never means that the vast market that you need to be selling into is ever going to develop for you. Why? Because there's a huge chasm between those early adopters and that mass market. And how do you get across it? And I would suggest to any entrepreneur, especially somebody in technology, go read that book. Go read that book. Now, it's probably a little dated by now, but its fundamental, theories are still, I think, true. And so I would highly recommend that anybody who is in technology, AI, it doesn't matter, is you can go get early adopters, and they're generally easy to find.
Basic principles still apply.
It's easy to find early adopters. It's really hard to find the mass market. And without the mass market, you're not even going to be a footnote in history. Nobody's going to even remember that you were around. And if you force me to come up with a third one, I would have to think about that a lot, because I don't know that there's another one beyond that. But
I think you've described it. Be true to yourself.
Yeah, maybe.
Be true to yourself.
Well, I think the other thing is this notion that hard work that can sometimes be all-consuming is a bad thing, and it's not. It's everything. And you have to have a wife or husband or partner who gets that, who understands that this is the person I'm with. This is how they are. This is their makeup. And if they can't accept that and they're going to fight you along the way, you can't handle that stress. You will not handle that stress. One or the other is going to give. Either the business is going to suffer or your relationship's going to suffer. But everybody's going to suffer along the way. And so make sure you have a partner who supports you. And look, I know a lot of young entrepreneurs today are like, well, I can't leave my day job because I need health insurance, or I need okay, if you're not in a financial condition to go do it, then don't. By God. Most divorces today are as a result of financial discord between the husband and the wife or the partners. And if you can't solve that problem for your partner, then you're not ready. You're not ready. You have to have the financial wherewithal to do it. Before I started my first company, I moved here from California. So here I am in this super low cost, living area where public schools are better than the private schools in California. And the money I made on my house, the 2 houses I owned in California before I moved here, covered my expenses for the first 2 or 3 years. I had 2 or 3 years worth of income in the bank when I started Death Station. Now, 2.5 years later, I was wondering where my next mortgage payment was going to come from because we emptied the well to go get that company done. But in the long run, it all worked out, and I did make all my mortgage payments. But there's a certain reality that some people just don't live in, and that reality is if you don't have the resources to do it, don't fool yourself.
Or at least can't visualize where those resources will come from.
Well, you better have a pretty solid path or a big hard circle around wherever those funds are going to come from. Maybe I've got a rich uncle or whatever, and he said, hey, Rebecca, whatever you decide to go do, don't worry about it. I got your back. I mean, Bill Gates, look at Bill Gates. Did the thing that he did with Microsoft early on in his career, right? Early on in the life of Microsoft. But what did Bill Gates have that most of us don't? He had a $1 million funded trust fund that his grandpa put together for him. So if this didn't work out, life wasn't going to be too bad for Bill. Bill was going to do just fine. Who amongst us have that? I didn't. Most people don't. So a lot of people who take what are perceived as risks, it's not that risky. It's not. Because why? You have a safety net somewhere. And when I started Death Station, I felt, coming from Silicon Valley, that I had a safety net, that if this didn't work out, I just go back into the industry and get a job, and I was paid well, I'll be paid well again, and I'll probably get more responsibility or whatever, and I'll be fine. But when that didn't happen in the first 5 years, my Rolodex got a little dusty. The people I knew had moved on, they were doing different things. Don Peterson was somebody that they knew in their past and hadn't heard from in a few years. Whatever happened to Don? Where did he go? Oh, he moved to the middle of the country. He did? Why did he do that? So you age off pretty quickly in any industry-based safety net that you think you have. And so, look, a lot of these people that work for Cerner, they're out in the community now starting businesses. Okay, hurry up, because in 5 years, nobody will know or remember that you work for Cerner. In fact, they won't even remember Cerner's name.
But I think it's really important not even to set this barrier that if you don't have enough resources, it's unattainable. I didn't have enough resources. When I acquired that business out of the merger, I had an SBA loan, and I had a year's runway.
Ooh.
And it was necessity is often the mother of invention.
I
mean, you want to talk about having incentive to get busy, get outside of the halo, move around this country, find customers, people who believe you can help improve their businesses. And that was definitely the incentive for doing it. To your point, though, don't do it if you don't have the willingness, the drive to go at that, because it created incredible stress on my family.
Oh, I'm sure.
It created incredible stress on our resources.
Yeah.
And in my case, the relationship didn't sustain through that kind of stress, but I was still willing because there was nowhere up. There was nowhere to go except for up.
Yeah.
You had to go up.
Yeah.
And so I think, to your point, it's not the barrier of don't do it if you don't have the resources. Don't do it if you don't have the will. That's really the core of that conversation, I think.
I think it comes down to, Rebecca, how much stress you're willing to take on.
Mm-hmm.
How far are you willing to go for this? And, I know that when I started the last company, my wife had to work because I didn't take any money out of that company for 2 years.
Mm-hmm.
I took a little bit, but not a lot. I mean, less than $50,000 a year. And, I was used to making $250,000, $300,000 a year before that. And so, I hated that my wife had to go to work because she'd been home with the kids for all of their lives from the time we moved here until then. But the best part about it is she was willing to do it. She understood why she had to do it. She knew it was going to be of some help to us in order to execute on this business. And I have such great respect, and I'm so thankful for her, because not everybody has a partner like that. And so we didn't fight about it. It wasn't a happy time, but it was a real, I think that's what,
necessity.
I think that's, if my life, if I had to bottom line everything about my life, the authenticity I talked about, being myself, that my friend Tom Coleman told me about back when I was in my 20s, and even up until today, I try to live in the real world. I try to live a realistic life, and I try to be realistic in what I tell people when they ask. And I think that's what everybody should be. Be realistic. What do you realistically think you can accomplish with this? Look, if you're all hell-bent on going and doing it because you realistically believe you have all of the chops it takes to get it done, then by all means, man, go do it. Go do it. But if you have doubts, if you have gaps in what you think it's going to take to get it done, go figure out how to fill the gaps somehow, and then go do it. But don't do it with all these gaps thinking somehow they're going to solve themselves, because first of all, they don't solve themselves. Secondly, and more importantly, you don't know where all the gaps are. The unknown unknown is what's going to bite you in the ass. Mm-hmm. We can all predict what the known unknowns are going to cost us, more or less. But the unknown unknowns, they're going to creep up on you, gaps you never even thought you might have. It's like the Fremont location taking 8 or 9 months to get just a permit to go finish the inside of the building so we could get around to opening it up. It took another 6 or 8 months to get the interior finish done. If we had bet the farm on opening that location, the farm would have been sold in pieces long before we ever got it open. And thank God we had the resources to cover that extended waiting period that we didn't anticipate. But if you don't have that, if you don't have discretionary sort of reserve resources to deal with those unknown unknowns, you're going to find yourself screwed at some point. Yeah. Because you can't anticipate them all. You just can't.
So thank you for the opportunity to do this with you.
Well, thank you. I involuntarily share a lot of my experience with people. As I've gotten older, I've gotten into the habit of telling stories like old people do. And, I can relate most things that happened in my life to a story today about, you asked me about who had the most impact on me in terms of the individual. And I mentioned Dan McCraney. And what's interesting about him is that even though he brought me into AMD, he left before I started. He left to go work for another company. And I was originally so pissed at him that I called him and I said, Dan, how can you be leaving? You just hired me. I need your guidance. He said, no, you don't. Just be yourself. Go do your thing. You'll be fine. If you need me, give me a call, but you'll be fine. And so he hired me in Chicago, and he ended up moving to Florida to go run a deal for Harris Semiconductor. But I still think of him today as fondly as I thought of him back in 1980 when he hired me. And I think those are the things, the authentic things, the realistic things that you hold on to, is that those are the people who found something in you that you didn't see in yourself and helped you to get somewhere. And although, my ongoing then 10-year career at AMD was based on me because Dan was gone, he did exactly for me what I needed, and that was just a foot in the door. And I think sometimes we don't recognize that or understand it. Sometimes that foot in the door, is the real pearl in all of this. And, I hope people who listen to this understand that there's nothing magical about me. I'm not smarter than anybody else. I've been in the right place at the right time now and then. I mean, starting, the last company, IVX, it really was a right time to do that in our healthcare industry. Obamacare had just come into full play back in 2010, 11 and 12, and we started the company in 2012. And that led to more people with health insurance, which led to more opportunity to serve more people. And while I can't count what exactly that impact was, I know it had an impact. And I'm a conservative when it comes to politics, and so I was not in favor of Obamacare. I'm still not. But the fact that it helped my company, I'm glad it was there for that. So there's all these little pearls of good things that happen. And I can tell you, I mean, I know, is it Y Combinator or Idea Lab? Bill Gross, Idea Labs, right? He wrote a book or wrote an article about, why or what companies within Idea Lab, and there were like 600 companies that had come and gone through there, and why were they successful? Some were successful, why were some not? And he boiled it down to one attribute: the right timing. So much of what we do is about timing. And, I look at all these people starting AI companies, and it may be too late for them. Maybe it's the right time. I don't know. But I think that like any other market, it's going to start out very fragmented, and then it's going to consolidate quickly over time. The question is, are you going to be swept up in that consolidation in a positive way? Or are you going to get left behind by the consolidation and never be a player or never be a part of the play that the industry, turns.
And if you think you're going to be at the core of it, then what are you going to do to be at the core of it?
Well,
I mean, that's the real challenge, is if you want to get in the space and play and you want to be a winner in the space, then you can't just count on something sweeping you along.
Right.
You have to say, what am I going to do to differentiate and be at the core
of
that?
And I tell this to people when they ask, that there's no such thing as a small player. It's an oxymoron. Players are never small. And if you're small, you're not a player. You might think you are. I mean, it's like this woman who posted on LinkedIn this morning about, well, I was really a great contributor to my company, and they don't know what, they don't know I'm ready to walk out the door. Yeah, okay, I was a great contributor at AMD, and yet I realistically understood that the price to earnings ratio was not going to change on the day I leave. And what do they care about most? The price-to-earnings ratio. They care a lot more about that than they do about me. So when I left, it wasn't a blip on their radar other than, hey, we lost a good guy. Now that happens, right? And I think that's the realistic part of life. If you don't recognize that you're just one individual in a great big sea of people, and that there's a bazillion different ideas out there to go do a million different things, many of which are worthwhile, many of which are not, you're just one of them. You're not special. You're not super duper. You're not more talented than everybody else. You may land on an opportunity that does really, really well, and you may fail at you can have a great idea and still fail. And, it's like having a great new potato chip. Well, if you can't get Frito-Lay off the shelf, I don't give a rat's ass you got a great potato chip. You can't sell it to anybody because you don't have distribution, right? So I think there are so many... There's such value in living in the real world and not deluding yourself into something that somebody told you could be, or somehow in the early morning hours, while you're taking a shower, man, I could do that. I could do that. Well, so I watched him do it. I could do the same thing. Yeah, okay. No, probably not. And I think that if, there's a final note that I'd want to leave is live an authentic and realistic life. Don't try to be something you're not. It's going to not bode well for you in the long run. So, well, Rebecca, thank you for doing this. This is unusual for me. I do a lot more talking than I typically do. But I appreciate the questions. I appreciate your time, and I appreciate your insights. It's been a lot of fun. So thank you.
You're welcome.